Welcome, everyone. I'm Tracy Fitzpatrick, and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you so much for joining us here at Netcom Learning, a market leader in promoting lifelong learning, training, and talent development solutions. We are very excited to host today's event, AWS Discovery Day, Introduction to GenAI for Business and Technical Decision Makers. Presenting today's topic is Terumi Laskowski. Terumi is an Amazon AAI training consultant and author holding more than 25 years of experience in IT. Her passion for cloud computing developed at a very early age. Being a teenager, she always showed her enthusiasm for understanding the technologies that make computers tick. This deep sense of curiosity on technology led her to achieve all the associate, professional, and specialty certifications and was recognized as an AWS authorized instructor champion. Now, please bear in mind that this is an overview of a very robust topic. We offer a collection of technical and business courses that can be tailored to your specific requirements. If you are interested in a further discussion, you can make an appointment with our learning consultants through our website at netcomlearning.com. Today's session is also being recorded, so you'll get free access to the recording in the next 24 hours via email. Netcom Learning helps customers build innovative learning organizations by achieving a smarter workforce, adapting to change, and driving growth. We do this with a broad catalog of offerings, developing customized learning plans, and our global delivery capabilities. Since 1998, we have been empowering organizations with our managed learning services to help them reach optimal performance results and address challenges. We have 9 practice areas in which we specialize. They encompass people, process, and technology training. Today's presentation is from the AI and data practice areas. Netcom Learning offers a comprehensive training portfolio of courses for the topic being covered today. Our upcoming classes include various trainings on the given courses. You can also access a variety of marketing assets, such as the free training and blogs, by clicking on the available event handout. These offerings can be found with a simple search on our website at netcomlearning.com. Today's session is tailored to equip decision makers with the essential knowledge needed to navigate projects integrating artificial intelligence. Whether you're a business leader or a technical expert, this session will provide you with valuable insights into leveraging generative AI effectively. And now I would like to give you a quick overview of the logistics before we get started. To begin with, you do have the option to view in full screen by clicking on the full screen button on the right side of the GoToWebinar viewer. Simply hit the escape key to exit the full screen. Everyone has been muted except for our presenters. Feel free to submit any questions you have for the presenters here in the questions pane, and we will address them at the end of the session. And to get the best out of today's events, we've included the slides, courses we talk about, and marketing assets in the handout section of your GoToWebinar viewer. You may refer to them at any time to get a better understanding of today's topic. And we do realize that some of you may have to leave early and want to let you know that as you do leave the session today, you will be presented with a short survey. We would like to request for you to take a quick moment to participate in that survey. Your feedback really helps us understand your learning experience and improve our future sessions for you. The survey answers are measured on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 representing outstanding and 1 representing poor. And now I'd like to pass this over to our trainer to present today's topic. Hey, Terumi, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. The topic today is Introduction to GenAI for Business and Technical Decision Makers. My name is Terumi Laskowski, and it is my pleasure to be sharing this exciting topic with you today. All right, so let's take a look at the agenda for today's webinar. We have 5 things on the table. The first one is Introduction to GenAI. Second, importance of GenAI. Third, technical foundations and terminology. Fourth, evaluating risk and mitigations. And last but not least, five, prepping organizations for Gen AI initiatives. And I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have at the end of the webinar. All right, so let's get started. The first topic is Introduction to Gen AI. And the way I like to get started here is by giving you a quiz. Yeah, a quiz. So here we go. We're going to do a Gen AI quiz, all right, and see how you do. So, very first question, here it is. Now, I'm going to be showing you an example of an application, and you tell me if this is Gen AI or not. Okay, so the application that I'm going to show you in a moment is a metric conversion calculator. Okay, and you've probably used maybe or seen something like this before. So let's see how this works. Here we go. Okay, so it's a pretty simple application, non-metric to metric conversion. So this one is going to convert miles to kilometers. All right, so here we go. I'm just going to put 5 miles. Right, for those of you that does 5-mile runs, let's see how many kilometers this is. So we'll say convert. Okay, so 8.0467 kilometers. All right, so is this a Gen AI application? I'll give you some time to think about it while I flip back onto my slides. Okay, I'll give you 3 more seconds. All right, so that's time's up. So what do you think? Is this Gen AI or no? And here's the big reveal. This is not Gen AI. So this is an example of a traditional application or traditional programming. This one was written using JavaScript, a very simple program, as you see on the right. Okay, so there you go. So you want to try again? How did you do, by the way? Okay, all right, so let's go with the next one. So same question, is this Gen AI? Okay, and I'm going to show you in a moment a screen capture of me using this application just a little bit before. So this is going to ask, is this a cat or not a cat? Right, so actually this one asks, is this a cat or is this a dog? When I upload either the picture of a cat or a picture of a dog. Okay, all right, so let me switch my screen just a minute. Hang on. Let's see here. Just a moment. Okay, all right, so I'm going to switch screen right now. All right, so let's see if this looks okay. Okay, so all right, so I think this one is kind of showing a little too big. Okay, sorry, have to move this a little bit. All right, so here we go. So I'm going to start this and you'll see, this is just a recording of what I did earlier, okay? So here we go. I just chose a photograph and I'm just going to say submit. And by the way, it says, I think it's a dog. It's actually a picture of my puppy. Okay, he's wearing his blue suit. All right, so I'm going to present a next one. It's going to be another photo. Okay, and it said, hey, how about this one? Oh, it says, hey, looks like it's a cat. Well, is it though? The picture's kind of small, so let me go ahead and expand that a little bit. Okay, so I'm not much of a cat person, but this kind of looks pretty fierce. All right, so it did a pretty good job. So let's try the third picture. All right, so I just uploaded a photo and I'll say submit. And oh, I think it's a dog. Well, let's see. Is this a dog? I don't know about you, but I have not seen a dog cute like that. Okay, so I think it's a cat. Well, I think this thing made a mistake. Hey, nobody's perfect, right? Okay, so let me go ahead and switch back to my slides. So what do you think? Was this a Gen AI application or no? Once again, I'll give you 3 seconds. Okay, so that was 3 seconds. All right, so let's see. Is this Gen AI? No, it's not Gen AI. In fact, it's actually a machine learning application, okay? But it is a non-Gen AI machine learning application, right? To determine if the image is a cat or a dog. Okay. All right, so let's give another one a shot. All right, so how are you doing so far? Okay, all right, so let's go to the next one. So is this Gen AI? Right. So this one is, I'm sure most of you have heard about it, if not already or using it actively. This is ChatGPT. Okay. And once again, I grabbed a screenshot of what I did before. So let me show you this one. So I'm going to show you that example of a text to image generation. So I'm going to give a text command to ChatGPT, and I'm going to ask it to show me something. All right, so let me go ahead and switch the screen again. So hang on just a moment. So let's see if I can get this one to work. All right, hang on here. Okay, so let's see. Hang on just a moment. I think it ran for whatever reason. All right, so let me switch the screen for you right now. Okay, so here's ChatGPT, and let me go ahead and let's see if I can show you the. Let me move this up a little bit so you can see the prompt at the bottom. Okay, and here we go. So I said in the message, a surprised mechanical dog. All right, do your thing. Let's see, it's thinking a little bit. All right. Oh, by the way, if you have not used ChatGPT to create pictures, you can now. Yeah. And look at this. All right. So here is a surprised mechanical dog. There you go. So that was the output from ChatGPT. All right. So let me go ahead and switch the screen. Hang on just a moment. Okay. So what do you think? Was that an example of Gen AI? I'll give you 3 seconds to think about that. Okay, well, let's see. Let's see the big reveal. Oh, yes. Right? So this is an example of Gen AI. Okay. So create an image based on a text, and we usually call that text prompt, right? And it's a command in the form of text. Okay. So yes, this was exactly Gen AI. And then you may be thinking, well, hang on, right? Okay, so what's the difference? Now you may instinctively know what the difference might be, but let's take a look and see if we could, delve a little bit deeper into this. Okay, so what is the difference amongst all the 3 examples that I have presented to you? So I'm going to use an analogy on this one. Okay, so here we are. So the very first one, I'm going to use the cooking analogy. Okay, and hang on just a moment. I just want to make sure that the screen looks fairly big enough. So hang on just a moment. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's take a look. The cooking analogy that I'm going to use is 3 examples. One, uh, cooking by following a recipe. Okay. So for example, for me, my mom was an excellent cook. So I got lazy and I didn't cook at all. But there was a time in my life where I wanted to learn how to cook like her. So she had, several recipes, and I just followed instruction step by step. Okay, so that would be one example. Okay. The next one is cooking by seeing many recipes and learning the foundational concepts of that. That is, what is the core idea of what recipes are? Okay, and then learning the principle of cooking by seeing many things, and then cooking based on the knowledge that you have. And the third one is cooking by creating a brand new recipe based on what you have learned. All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so by following a recipe step by step, this is an example of a traditional programming, right? So because you have a very clear step-by-step instructions, okay, and where I have deterministic process is that, just like a recipe, if you follow the recipe, hopefully you have a pretty good idea of what you're going to get out of it. Okay, all right. And if you keep on following the recipe, you should get something similar to it every single time. Okay, so same ingredients, same input, same output, hopefully. Okay, and you as a chef or you as a cook have a full control. So if the chef is a programmer, the programmer has a complete control over the entire process. Okay, so you can decide what sequence of steps that you're going to take, what measurements you're going to take, and what type of method that you're going to use to cook that recipe or to write that code. Okay, all right. So a dish, right, a final dish that you get out of this is a direct result of these predefined instructions. Okay, so that's a example of a traditional programming. So let's take a look at the next one. So the next one here is following recipes and improvising, okay, based on what you learned. Okay, so this is an example of traditional machine learning. So for machine learning, you probably heard that you have the machine is learning. So what is it learning from? It's learning from data. So it's just like learning to cook by following different types of recipes, and then slowly but surely understanding the principles behind cooking, right? So the model, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but for now, think of it like a brain. Okay, learns from examples, that is data, rather than following a fixed recipe, because you're seeing many recipes. Okay, then there is an adaptive process, so that a model, the brain, adapts and then improves over time as you learn more data. Okay, and similar to how a cook improvises their skill through practice. Right? Okay, so learn the form first and then start improvising. Okay, then last but not least, I have here inference and generalization. So just like an experienced cook can tweak a recipe based on what they've learned in previous recipes, machine learning model can make prediction as to what is the outcome is going to be based on the what it has learned previously, based on the data that it used to become trained. Okay, so following the recipe, tweaking it, improvising it will be an example of a traditional machine learning. So what you saw was cat or dog, okay, although it didn't do such a great job on the last one, where they thought that the cat was a dog, okay, is, it was taught what a cat is, what a dog is, and then when it's presented with a brand new photo of something, it says, oh, based on what I learned, it doesn't look exactly like what I've learned before, but, based on what I learned, I think this is a cat, I think this is a dog, right? Okay. All right, and last but not least, here is the GenAI. So inventing a brand new recipe. That will be an example of what GenAI would be. Okay, so creating brand new content, brand new recipe, right? So GenAI is like a chef who invents entirely new recipe. But of course, chefs use their knowledge from previous learning, and then combine ingredients in a very unique, novel ways, resulting in a very unique dish. The second one, innovative and creative process. So just like a chef creates how do they create a new dish, right? Well, they create a new dish from their understanding of, let's say, flavors, techniques, right? Gen AI will create new content such as text, image, music. You probably think of other ideas based on the pattern it has learned from humongous and large data sets previously. And last but not least, you do sometimes have a very unpredictable outcomes. Okay, so the outcome are often very unique and can really change, be different from every time you run it. So showcasing creativity, okay, and innovation in the new content. So there you go. Okay, now let me give you a more an analogy that is a little bit closer to what a actual Gen AI is. So let's take a problem of sorting numbers. Okay. So if you have a bunch of numbers and you want to sort them, there are many ways you can sort numbers. And one of the sorting technique is called bubble sort. Okay. But we don't need to go into what a bubble sort is, but it's a way of sorting numbers. Okay. So if we were to look at the way to sort numbers, if we're looking at traditional programming, we write a program which will follow instruction to do a bubble sort, right? So it's very much like following a recipe and creating a cake, let's say. Okay, so that would be a traditional programming. Now with machine learning, we'll train the system, the machine learning model, to show many sorting examples using bubble sort. Here's the unsorted number. Here's what it is after a bubble sort. Here's the unsorted numbers. Here's the bubble sort. And just give them many, many, many examples, right? Then the system will understand basically what's happening from unsorted to sorted, okay? And and sort the items, the brand new unsorted items, into sorted items using what they've learned previously. Okay, so that would be a bubble sort. So this will be something like the cook, learning many and seeing many recipes, and then basically understanding the underlying concept and creating a, a dish from that. Last but not least, we have the Gen AI. So with Gen AI, it's going to create a brand new algorithm that is brand new way, right, or method for sorting that is pretty unique, okay, and not really directly coming from existing algorithms such as bubble sorting. It'll be something quite different from that. Okay, so like a chef coming out with a brand new dish. So this is what an example of a Gen AI would be. Okay, so I hope now you're kind of getting an idea of the difference between traditional programming, Gen AI machine learning, and Gen AI. All right, so I think we're ready to move into the next section. Now that you have some idea about differences between traditional programming, traditional non-Gen AI machine learning, and Gen AI, let's investigate as to the importance of Gen AI, specifically importance of Gen AI to business. I have 4 items here that will go step by step. The first one is content creation and personalization. Second one is creative design and innovation. Third is enhanced customer experience and engagement. And fourth, efficiency and cost savings. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. First one, content creation and personalization. Okay. So Gen AI can create, that is to generate, very high quality content. Well, you saw the example of ChatGPT creating that mechanical dog with a surprised face. Okay, so something like that. But it's not just about creating images, it's also about creating text, it's about creating audio, movies. Okay, so take, for example, something like creating blog posts. How about social media updates? Right. So these days, businesses are taking a lot of time responding to social media and creating presence in social media. So I think Gen AI is going to be very useful in that case. If you're in marketing, how about creating marketing copy? And by the way, the next one, I do this a lot. I have a very small T-shirt shop online. So whenever I upload a brand new T-shirt design, for example, I'll use Gen AI to create product descriptions. Okay, and for me, it's very helpful because when I have several T-shirts, right, and the descriptions, although they're very engaging, they have a very similar tone about it. So it's a consistent customer experience when they come to my store. Okay. And so that is in the same way that it's helping me, the small business. It can help you, businesses, maintain a very consistent and yet at the same time very engaging online presence without actually, without having extensive human labor involved in it. Like I said, I'm a small business, just one person, and yet I'm able to create design and create product description, and I don't have to hire anybody else. To me, that's a very big plus for me. Anyway, moving forward with the next one, create personalized marketing message. So by creating a personalized marketing message and campaigns to tailor to individual customer preferences, right, Gen AI could increase engagement and hopefully lead to better conversion rate. Okay. And this includes things like creating personalized emails, creating targeted advertisements, and perhaps creating customized product recommendations. The next one is creative design and innovation. I'm not sure if you think of that, the dog, the mechanical dog that ChatGPT created as being very creative. I think so. I didn't have to tell it anything. It came up on its own. I think it was a pretty cute dog. So Gen AI can assist in brainstorming things. I mean, I could have asked ChatGPT, hey, give me 5 examples of something, and I could have chosen something from that, or base my final design on something that ChatGPT also recommended. So it's very helpful as a brainstorming aid and generating innovative product ideas. So for me, I don't think I would come up with that particular dog design. So it kind of helps me to expand my view of things. So yeah, it's very, very helpful in that way to come up with a very innovative things, out of the box, so to speak. And perhaps designing new fashion, yeah, new fashion items. So for example, here, this picture that I have on my slide, I don't quite recall what I told Midjourney. So I use a tool called Midjourney, which is a Gen AI that produces images from text. And I think for this one, I said I wanted something very colorful and fashion, right? But it had to be a cyborg design. So there you go. So it'll help you with these brand new fashion items and menus items, and perhaps coming up with a brand new furniture design. I mean, think of anything that requires some kind of an innovative design, and even homes and architectural plans based on certain learned patterns that you've taught your model. And this will speed up your product development cycle, and what's most really important is reducing time to market of your brand new product. Next one is Gen AI can generate unique logos, let's say, branding materials, and some creative advertisement that captures the audience attention, and then at the same time, communicating brand messages in a very unique way. And this will lead to more effective marketing campaigns. Okay, it's all good. All right, and then let's take a look at the next one here, which is enhanced customer experience and engagement. Okay, what is this all about? Well, you've probably seen in a lot of the websites at usually on the right hand corner, a little box that says, "Hey, can I help you?" And that's of course not a human, but a chatbots, right? So virtual assistants and chatbots are all over the place these days, and not all chatbots are based on GenAI, but a lot of them are. And GenAI powered virtual assistants and chatbots does provide very personalized customer support. Um, it can handle wide range of questions and tasks very, very efficiently. Okay, and this improves customer satisfaction and does reduce the workload on the actual human support. Right. So in this type of setup, the human support is there, but it's usually on the path of escalation, so that if the chat the chatbot is not sufficient to satisfy the customer, they can ask to contact the actual person. Okay. The other day, I have a dog that had to get his tooth extracted, right? So I used my app to claim for the insurance. Okay, and everything was done by a chatbot, and I didn't feel any frustration. It was very efficient. It was a very nice experience, and I was quite surprised. Yeah. So anyway, so you see things like that, right? So next one here is the interactive and engaging content, right? So Gen AI creates a very interactive content, such as, I think I mentioned that it can actually create videos these days. Right? I've tried some of these products. They only create very short videos, like 15 seconds, 30 seconds. I mean, I think that's long as far as the video content is concerned. But yeah, Gen AI can easily do that for you. And perhaps personalized stories. So you tell what the storyline is and ask it to create stories, books, videos, right? And it can also help you to create a very immersive experience that will enhance customer engagement and satisfaction. I mean, you may even forget that you're actually talking to a Gen AI, let's say a chatbot. Okay. So that helps to keep customers engaged and also help you to help the customers to get very invested in the brand as well. And last but not least, let's take a look at the efficiency and cost savings. Okay. When it comes to reducing production costs, I think you could probably tell where that's coming from. So by automating, creating these various types of content, by using Gen AI, it helps businesses to save on costs associated with hiring and managing a large, team of uh, content production teams. So you could probably do it with a fewer people. And also, when it comes to scalable solutions, in IT, what we mean by scalable is, just imagine something like a website. Let's say you have one server that is your hosting your website, and it's probably okay when you don't have much traffic into your website. You'll probably work very efficiently. But the second you have a lot of traffic coming in, just that one server may become very quickly overwhelmed, and the response time may degrade. And the people that are looking and say, "Well, what's going on with this website? Is it down?" Right? But when you have a scaling feature built in, when the traffic increases, the system will increase its power. That is, add more servers, add more memory, add more storage, whatever it thinks it needs to maintain that high level of responsiveness. Right? So that's called scaling. So Gen AI, like anything else, is a system, okay, and it can actually scale very easily to meet the increasing demand. There's another thing about scaling. So scaling is to also assist in other parts of the business. So for example, there's this thing called synthetic data. So I have here generate synthetic data to augment predictive models. So if you have let's say a non-Gen AI traditional machine learning models, you need lots and lots of data to train it. Okay, and where do you get the data from? So we'll be talking a little bit about that a little bit later on. But generally, you need to have data to train the model, and you may not have real data. So if you don't have enough data to train it, you may be able to create synthetic data that looks very much like the real data, but not, right? Created by Gen AI. So by augmenting, it provides more the model will become more accurate and more robust in its forecasting, in its predictions, because it had more data to train from. So GenAI could be used in that way as well. All right. And I'm sure you could think of other benefits to the business that GenAI can actually help you with. So with that thought, let's go ahead and move on to the next section. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit here. We're going to move into something that's a bit more technical. So the third section is technical foundations and terminology. So first, the foundation. Let's start from the beginning, which is, what is artificial intelligence? What is AI? And I'm sure you've heard of many different description of what an AI is. I'm just going to pick something that is very simple and common. So AI is a computer system that models, that sort of mimics, right, humans, that can perform tasks that usually requiring human intelligence. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard of something called the Turing test. So the Turing test was proposed by a person by the name of Alan Turing back in 1950. It's almost like a game, right? Where a person is talking to a computer and another person on the other side of the room, right? So, or another side of the wall, so that person can't see who they're talking to. Okay, and then maybe they're using something like a chat, using the keyboard and the display. And if the person cannot tell which one is the computer and which one is the human, then the computer is really, really good at pretending to be a human, right? Okay, so that was what's called the Turing test. So basically, there you go. That is what an AI is. Okay. Now, AI is not just one thing. There are many, many branches of AI. Okay. So I have here a whole bunch of stuff here. I have like 8 branches of AI: machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing, computer vision, robotics, knowledge representation and reasoning, planning and navigation, speech recognition, and I'm sure there are a lot more. Okay. And in fact, you may say, oh, wait a minute, I thought natural language processing belongs someplace else. Well, you'll come to realize that many of these branches actually work with each other. So, for example, natural language processing can be used in combination with machine learning, for example. Okay, and here, deep learning, even though I have it as a separate branch, it's actually a branch within machine learning. I've kind of separated that out because a lot of people think of deep learning as something quite separate, and uh, and that's very special, and which it is. In fact, deep learning will be a foundation for Gen AI. So let's take a look and see what this machine learning and deep learning is all about, because out of all of it, these two are the one that's mostly related to Gen AI. So what is machine learning then? The definition of machine learning here is this. It is a branch of AI, as I've already discussed to you, okay? And it's something, it's some computer system that is able to learn from data that you give it. Then, as you give more data, that is, as it gains more experience, it can improve their performance over time. And that it does not require any explicit programming. So you don't have to program anything, but it just does its thing. Right? And it'll use something called algorithm, which I will explain a bit later in the terminology section. But for now, think of it as like a process that you use, or the framework that you use to do this learning. It can, in the end, predict outcomes. And also, these outcomes, or the answers that they come up with, gets refined as more data becomes available. So basically, to make a long story short, it's a machine that is able to learn from the data you give it. Okay, and it's able to improve on its learning. So once again, let's kind of flip back into what a traditional program looks like, because I want to compare the traditional programs compared to machine learning. Like, how does machine learning do its thing? Okay, so here I'm showing you a depiction of a program, a traditional program. So the program is a process where a programmer, right, can write explicitly, that is to write it out, rule-based instructions. So, basically write it in PHP, Python, JavaScript, right? These steps that you want the machine to execute. And, like I said, using specific language. Okay, so that means in the box, the blue box is the actual program that you write, but the program represents rules, these are steps, and then you feed in data, then it spits out an answer, right? So for example, if you're adding two numbers, x and a y, and the answer is z, then the rule would be you'll receive x, you'll receive y, and then add them together in doing some kind of method, then you spit out z. Okay, so there you go. That's a traditional programming. Compared to that, machine learning is a bit different. Okay, so machine learning, as you see in the box, I have model algorithm. So algorithm is, like I said, it's a way that it learns, special type of framework, right, which we'll go into a bit later. Okay, so it learns from data and then improve their performance over time without being explicitly programmed by a programmer. So as you see in the drawing, you see the data going in, which is very similar to the traditional program, but unlike the traditional program, you're actually putting in answers. What? Right? So basically, remember the cat dog classification, right? So if I give a dog image so they can learn what a dog looks like, I'll tell it that it's a dog. If I put cat in there, I'll tell it it's a cat. Okay, so then it's going to learn and identify what is the main difference between a dog and a cat. So it's able to identify it with certain probability. Then it comes up with this rule that says, okay, in case of this, it's a cat. In case of that, it's a dog. Right? Maybe the ears look different, maybe the snout looks different, the fur looks different, well, what have you. Okay, so once it has these rules, then that is called a model. So it's a trained model. So, it can, if you give a new, let's say, a image of a dog or cat with a certain amount of accuracy, it can come up with the answer, right? Okay. So this is basically what happens is that now that you have a trained model, you give brand new data that it's never seen before, brand new image of a dog, brand new image of a cat, and it will come up with the prediction. It says, oh, I think based on what I've learned, I think this is a cat, or I think this is a dog. And, sometimes they get it right, hopefully most of the time, and sometimes they get it wrong, like in the example that I showed you at the very beginning of this webinar. Okay, so it predicts outcomes which are then refined as more data becomes available. So if you give more data, says, when the machine learning says, oh, it's a cat or it's a dog, well, remember the one where it said it was a cat, but they thought it was a dog? It says, oh, no, that's not a dog, that's a cat. Okay, and it'll learn from that because the model, as you see in the box, periodically retrained with new data, so it becomes smarter, right? I hope. Okay, then it'll give you better results, right? So what are some of these examples? I have 4 examples here of this process. Something like an email spam filtering. So if it sees a bunch of spam and says this is a spam, this is not a spam, and somebody has to tell the machine learning model it's a spam or not a spam, and it's going to learn the core principles. Remember, so it's like a chef with lots and lots of recipes that is going to learn the underlying concept behind making those decisions, right? So email spam filtering is a good example. Movie recommendation system. So something like what you see on Netflix, right? In TV shows, it's going to try to guess by looking at what type of movies you like or what type of movie you viewed, what is the most likely next different type of movie that you may like, right? Number 3 is voice recognition system. Something like Siri and Alexa, it actually uses machine learning to understand what you're saying when you're talking to it, right? So natural language processing. Okay? And the field that I'm in IT security, so fraud detection is a big thing, right? So, for example, when banks see a credit card expenditure and the context, like, where did you spend this, how much it is, and all that information gets translated into this is fraud, this is not fraud, right? So if it's fraud, if it thinks it's fraud, it's going to ask you, hey, did you actually make this payment? Is this something that you approved? Okay, and if you say, yeah, it's something that I approved, great. So that becomes another piece of information so that it can predict your spending patterns better next time. Okay. So anyway, so this is machine learning, okay, in general. So now that we talked about machine learning, recall we have something called deep learning. All right, so let's talk about the deep learning a little bit. So what is deep learning? Okay, and what is the difference between regular learning and deep learning? Okay, so deep learning is a subset of machine learning, as I mentioned. Okay, but it uses a very special concept called deep neural networks. So the neural networks in general is it's the way to build machine learning models that mimics the human brain and how we learn. Now, I think there's some idea as to maybe it's not, I'm not sure if this is actually something that's been proven, right? But in a lot of cases, human beings are known to learn by making associations or making physical connections within neurons that we have in our brain. So some of these connections are stronger than the others. Some get strengthened, some gets weakened, and some of these connections may become broken, replaced by new connections, right? So these connections and the strength of these connections is how we learn, supposedly. Okay, right? So if you mimic a system that does that, that is to have a bunch of neurons that are making a lot of connections, right? And neurons are organized into what's called layers. And if you have many, 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 many layers, okay, this is called deep learning. Now, even in regular machine learning, we use the concept of neurons, but the layers are a lot less. So it's called shallow, right, compared to deep learning. So that's why I have these little neurons here. Okay. Right. So deep learning and neural networks. So I have another image here. So artificial neural networks are models, right? That is very much inspired by how our human brains work, supposedly. Okay. So this is basically what I just explained to you. And this depicts the layers. So normally you have many, many layers that are green parts, right? You see the blue, green, and orange. So you have the input layer. This is where we sense information, right? Neurons that takes care of consuming information. Then everything that process that information and making connections are what's called the hidden layers. Okay, and in deep learning, you have many, many more layers than what you just see here, right? This is an example of a shallow neural networks. Then the answer that pops out, right, is on the output layer. Now, it only shows one neuron, but there are many neurons here that could possibly be the answer. Anyway, so that's basically what a deep learning and neural networks is. So the next question then is, what then is a GenAI? Okay. So GenAI is actually a subset of deep learning. So deep learning in machine learning has something that is GenAI and non-GenAI deep learning. So we're just interested in the part of deep learning that has a GenAI component to it. So it is a subset of deep learning, which creates new content. Okay. So, and of course, the new content is not just coming out of a vacuum. It's coming from the data they have trained or learned. Okay. And it's not something that is just simply a classifying something like, oh, this is a cat or this is a dog, right? No, it's actually creating new content. So GenAI will create new content instances such as text, okay, like blog articles, images, like the dog that you saw, sounds, music, right, and videos and others that actually kind of looks like, right, it mimics the original training material, but different, okay, because there is a component of randomness into the output. So that it's not going to be exactly something that they learned, but it will be different, but it's based on what they've learned. So the examples here that I have for you is for the text, writing poems, news articles, programming. So we'll talk about this a little bit later on about writing codes, creating images, right? So this picture that you see, also GenAI, okay? Create new images that look like a real photograph. Yeah, I don't have a photorealistic one here for you, but I've seen examples of them, and boy, do they really look real, okay? And music, compose original music, and I have some use cases that I'll show you some examples of this music example. So to put everything together that we've discussed so far about what is Gen AI, so Gen AI belongs in a large category of AI, artificial intelligence. Within that, we have machine learning, right? Then within machine learning, we have deep learning, and within deep learning, we have Gen AI. So I hope that puts everything in context. Now let's move on to terminology. The way I organize these terms is based on how we train our machine learning models. How does the algorithm becomes a learned model? So number one, we'll take training data. Number two, algorithm. Three, training. Four, model. Five, tuning. And six, inference. All right, so let's take one by one. First, the training data. So what is that all about? Well, as we've been discussing already, these machine learning models, or the brain that you create, needs a lot of data to learn from. So data set usually contains input-output pairs, right? So I have here a thing called supervised learning, unsupervised learning. That's okay. I'm going to be covering that a bit later on. But regardless of what type of learning, requires data. Okay, and it's very important that you have a high quality data, because if you have something that's not high quality, obviously the learning is going to reflect that. And the site that I have here is called Kaggle. Kaggle is a place that a lot of machine learning engineers and scientists will use to collect the data. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. There you go. That's the Kaggle site. And let's see. So there you go, right? Tackle your next project with Kaggle, 343K data sets, etc. Right? Okay. So this is a very popular site. But I mean, it's always best to use your own data, okay? Because that's going to be very customized to your specific needs and your specific business. But a lot of companies don't have a ready set data to use, in that enormous amount that you need to come up with a good model. So if that's the case, there are sites available that you can go to as a go-to place. So that's what people mean when they say, okay, training data. Okay, so if we're talking about cats and dogs, we're talking about a place that has tons and tons of cat pictures and dog pictures. Right? Okay. All right. Now let's move on to the next terminology, which is the algorithm. Right. So I've been using algorithm a lot. So let's talk about what this is all about. Okay. So the algorithm is set of rules or steps that the model uses to learn from data. And as I mentioned earlier, it's the process or the framework, right, of how machine learning learns and how it handles the data. Okay. So there are different algorithms depending upon the type of problems that you have. Right. So if you're trying to decide whether it's a cat or a dog, you have a certain types of algorithm that you would use for that. If you're looking for something called regression, where you're trying to come up with a particular number or a value, take for example something like, okay, so I'm trying to sell my house, and I live in a certain area, and it's 2 bedroom, one bath, whatever. How much would be a proper price to put in the market, for example? Okay, so that would be something that would be a regression problem that will give you a value. Okay, Or generating text or generating images will use a completely different set of algorithms. Okay. So that's basically what an algorithm is. Here in the drawing here, I have three sets of algorithms that are commonly used for GenAI. Now, at this point, I'm not going to explain what these things are because at a later stage in the presentation, I will go into some examples of what these algorithms are used for. So kind of hold on until we get to that part. Okay, but right now it's about the algorithm, and I hope you have some good idea about what algorithm is. Next one is training. Now that you have the data, and now that you've selected the proper algorithm for the problem that you're trying to solve, now comes training. Okay, so the definition is a process of teaching the model, right? By using the training data and adjusting parameters to minimize errors. So if I give a picture of a cat, right, and it says it's a dog, obviously something needs to be changed. So okay, all right. I think you need more learning. Okay. So the importance is the effective training will result in a model that can generalize well to new and unseen data. Okay. So why do I have a picture of a off-road vehicle here? Okay. Well, I kind of think of it this way in the training. So let's say you buy yourself a off-road vehicle like that. Okay. And depending upon the type of terrain that you want to navigate, is it a stream? Are you going up the mountain? Are you in a gully? Right? Depending upon the type of terrain, you have to drive or use different techniques to drive, right, on that terrain. Okay, it's not just by having a four-wheel drive vehicle, it's about how you drive that vehicle, right? And the more and more you encounter these situations, you get better and better at hopefully negotiating these terrains using your vehicle. So maybe it's about the gear that you're in, maybe it's about the speed, maybe it's about your approach angle, right? So these are things that you can change and tweak while you are driving and in that context, right? So these are like the parameters, and the process of driving through a particular context is like training. So you do it over and over and over again. Oh, you flipped on the one side. Oh, you didn't get to go over that one rock. Let's try again, and let's tweak the way you approached it. Okay, so there you go, right? So that's one analogy of training. So you keep on doing it until you get really good at it. Okay. So then let's talk about the model, because in the end you'll end up with a trained model. There it is, right? So the trained model is just a mathematical equation. Okay, so you have some input. So the f of x is the f of whatever is the model, and the function, right? And then the x are the inputs. So here it's just x, but you could have multiple inputs going in. Then you get the output, right? So the model output. So that's basically what a model is. Okay, so it's an output of the training process. You have a model that's been tweaked, right? Remember the parameters that we adjusted, right? So now you have something that works very nicely in a certain context. Okay, so the importance of model is to make predictions or create new content based on the new input. So that's what we're looking for in GenAI, and how well does it do? Okay, so that would be your test as to, is it well trained or is it not well trained? So if I ask, hey, please create for me a picture of a surprised, mechanical dog, and if the picture that it creates is just a picture of a regular dog, then it probably is, you probably need to train it a little bit better. Okay, so that's basically what a model is. So the way I think of what model is like the brain, right? So now you got it, it's trained, it knows things. Okay, and now ask something and see if the answer matches your expectation. So foundation model, the way to think about it is a model that's already been pre-trained. So somebody hands you a brain and says, yeah, this thing knows things. Okay, but it's been trained on very general, large amounts of data, right? And that it has learned from, like I said, diverse set of data. So the type of answer that's going to give will give you, answers to a variety of questions, but it's very generalized. It's not very specific, for example. Okay. So the benefit of foundation model, and there are many, by the way, there are many foundation models, and they call them FMs. Okay. And FMs are good as a great starting point for any particular business problem that you want to tackle. Then a lot of these foundation models will allow you to fine tune that model in various ways so that it can now answer something that's very specific and not too generalized. Right. So I just want to kind of give that to you. You don't have to start from scratch, is what I'm trying to say. Tuning. Now, what is tuning? And why do I have a cyborg changing a tire? Okay. So tuning is a process of making your model better, right? Making its predictions more accurate. So that means optimizing. And notice the term hyperparameters. Okay. So the other things that we tuned before was parameters, right? But there's something completely separate, something called the hyperparameters, or the model to improve its performance. Okay. And I'll talk about what those hyperparameters are and how is it different from regular parameters. So the proper tuning of this will change the accuracy most of the time, and create a better model for you. Now, remember the parameter that we talked about before. So it was like, right, driving an off-road vehicle, and you're adjusting the angle of attack, the speed, the gear that you're in, and anything else that you can control while you're driving on that train. Okay, but what if you say, oh, you know what? Now that we tried, going over a big rock, we find out that the tires that we have is just not right. We have to have a bigger, more heftier tire. Well, you can't change the tire while you're driving, right? So you have to stop the car, right, and then exchange the tire. So in the same way, sometimes the kind of things that you can change is you have to stop the model from learning, then you change something, and then you have to restart the model to learn. And those things where you have to stop the model is called hyperparameters. So it's like changing a tire. So changing a tire would be something like a hyperparameter that you have to make adjustments to. Whereas speed and the gears, you can change them while you're driving. That is why you're training. Okay, so that's why these are called tuning. So tuning usually happens after you train the model and says, okay, let's see. Oh, is it still, seeing a cat and calling it a dog? Okay, so is there something else that we can do to make this better? And maybe it's something to do with a particular algorithm where you have set of hyperparameters that you could make adjustments to, and then try the training again. Okay, all right. So that's what's called tuning, and you keep this repeating this whole process until you get to the model that gives you a acceptable accuracy. Or when I'm saying accuracy, it's not literally accuracy. There are certain other types of metrics that people will use and say, okay, this is good, this is bad. But accuracy is a pretty common metric that people use to evaluate the model. Okay. All right. And last but not least, there was that thing called inference. Okay. So that was at the end of the whole process. So what is an inference? So inference is the output, right? So it's the process of using the trained model to make predictions, or to generate output, okay, based on the new input of the data. Right? So if you train the model to, let's say, create a new mechanical dog, that looks surprised, okay, and then you say, okay, create one. All right, you give a command, the prompt, and then does it create for you a something that you've never seen before, something that's unique, that looks like mechanical dog, that looks very surprised, right? So that's it, right? So the importance here is the inference itself is basically when you deploy your model to the world. It says, okay, I think the model's ready to go at it, right? Go ahead and give it command and see if it produces a bunch of dogs, okay? Or a bunch of, like a real creative, surprise looking dogs. So that's That's where this is referring to. Okay, and so it's going to apply. The model is going to apply what it learned to real world data. So that's usually the end product. And of course, as time goes on, you may have to retrain the model so they can learn better. So it could give you better, output. Okay, depending upon the kind of changes that are happening in the world. Right now, let's then talk about, okay, after we've kind of looked at all these, everything from training data all the way to inference, um, another set of terminologies. And to approach this, I want to revisit the definition of machine learning, right? So we'll revisit it in a little bit of different way. I created a tree diagram here. So way on the left-hand side, you see this thing called the machine learning. So that's at the base of the tree. Then from there, it expands out into 3 different branches. The top one is called supervised learning. The middle one is unsupervised learning. And the bottom one is reinforcement learning. So these are the 3 major types of machine learning. And within that, take for example, supervised learning, you have two additional branches. One is deep learning, and then you have non-deep learning, right? And we're only concentrating on deep learning because that's where you're going to find GenAI. So notice that GenAI is present in all 3 branches. That is, there's GenAI in supervised learning, there's GenAI in unsupervised learning, as well as GenAI in the reinforcement learning. Okay. Now, we're not going to go into the individual type of models / algorithms. I will give you some examples a little bit later down, but the important part here is where does GenAI fit into the entire picture? Okay, so it's in the deep learning within the machine learning category. All right, so now I would like to give you a bit about these 3 different types of learning. Okay. So the first one is supervised learning. Supervised learning is like learning in schools, right? So you have a teacher, right, teaching students something. So who has the answer to the question? Teacher should have the answer to the question. So the teacher will pose a question and the student answers, and the teacher will say that's right or that's wrong, and here's the reason why. Okay, so this is called the supervised learning. And machine learning, the answers are called labels. So for example, if we're teaching a machine learning to categorize between cat and a dog, when we give an image of a cat, the label will be cat. And if we give a picture of a dog, the label will be dog. And we'll feed a bunch of those things into as a training data for machine learning. Right? So it's very much like teacher-student scenario, okay, where teacher gives the label data and student learns from that. Okay. So compared to that, what is unsupervised learning? So here it is, right? Lowly old robot, okay, out in the world, right? Learning on its own. That's basically what an unsupervised learning is. So in this method, the algorithm, that is the kind of problem that you have and you've chosen a certain algorithm, the algorithm is given unlabeled data. So it says, okay, I don't know what the answer is. Here's a creature. I don't know what it is, okay? And the machine learning algorithm itself must find a pattern and relationship within the data itself. So that's basically you're allowing the machine learning to learn on its own. Okay, so learning through observation without teacher providing any guidance. Okay, now we're not doing that on purpose. It's because teacher, the humans, we may not know what those relationships are. So we want the machine learning to find out some underlying patterns that we humans cannot really discern readily. So it's almost like being dropped into a foreign country without knowing the language and then having to make sense based on the surrounding and survive. Okay, so that is basically an unsupervised learning. Okay, and the last one is called the reinforcement learning. Right, so the reinforcement learning is instead of learning from labeled data or unlabeled data, okay, reinforcement learning is where the machine learning algorithms learn from given reward for doing something, or perhaps a punishment or non-reward to do something else. Okay, and so I train dogs right on the side, and basically a lot of the dog training is reinforcement learning. So for example, if you tell the dog to sit, right, and if the dog by accident sits, you get a reward, and it'll eventually associate the word sit with actually, sitting down. Okay, but if it doesn't sit, well, I'm not going to punish it, but I'm not going to give it anything either. Okay, so it says, oh, okay, so if I don't do that, I don't get any reward. So I rather have a piece of that reward. So I'm going to sit, right? So it's that's basically what a reinforcement learning is. I have this thing called Deep Racer. Okay, so Deep Racer is an application that you can go check it out in AWS. So it's a virtual racing car and racing track, and the car initially doesn't know anything. So if you put it on the track, it's going to go off the track, right? So it's not going to follow the track; it's going to go off, right? Then you either give reward for staying on the track, or negative, reward, maybe minus points or something for staying getting off the track. And eventually the machine learning will guide the race car, to stay on the track. And then eventually it'll be able to maneuver curves, increase speed. And then once you have a car that you trained, that you think is smart, you could try it out in a competition with other people who train their cars. Let's go Deep Racer. It's an example of how you would use a reinforcement learning. Okay, as promised, let's take a look at some of the use cases using GenAI framework, that is algorithms. The first use case here is using something called CGANs, conditional generative adversarial network. Okay, so it's one of the algorithms. The use case here is this. Let's say you have a fashion brand that you want to develop or enhance, and you can create and use CGANs to generate new clothing designs based on current trends or certain customer preference. Okay, so here's the example. You can specify color, style, trend, vintage, modern, and then use the CGANs. It will produce a variety of unique clothing options that fits the conditions that you give it. So let's take a look at the next one here. This one is a supervised autoencoders example. The use case here is photo restoration. So the supervised autoencoder is very, very good at restoring things, such as restoring old or damaged photographs, for example. Okay, so here we're training on a data set of before and after. So before, the picture that's kind of old, black and white, missing certain things, and after, that would be an example of a restored version of that photograph. So then the autoencoder will learn to apply similar type of corrections to new, old, photos, right? Then it'll remove scratches, it'll adjust faded colors, and even recreating missing parts. So there you go. So that is the supervised autoencoders. The next use case is generative adversarial networks, or GANs. The use case here is real estate visualization. And you may have already seen something like this online and maybe not realize that it was generative AI. But so real estate agent, you can use GANs to create photorealistic images of homes after renovation, before you do the renovation, right? So by inputting images of a current property in the current state, and then telling it certain change that you want to make, GANs can actually create a new image showing that same property, how it will look after you apply these modifications. Okay, so people can see what it's going to look like before they actually start on that project. Let's take a look at the next one. VAs, variational autoencoders. So here, the use case is interactive video game content generation. All right, so what is that? Okay, so let's say you are a game developer. You can use a VAs to create new environments or something that looks a little bit different in the environment or character models, so that people can still stay engaged and keep the experience fresh, right? And without needing to actually manually design each new content or each new character every single time. So that should lead to the players, enhancing players' experience in the diverse settings, right? And creating them very, very quickly. All right, so next one here is unsupervised autoencoders. This one is the one that I mentioned about the creating music, right? So this example is music genre conversion. So autoencoders can be used to change the genre of a piece of music. So what does that mean? So let's say you have like a classical symphony music, and you can ask it to change that into jazz. So from classical to jazz genre. So if this allows for musicians and producers alike to kind of try out the cross-genre styles. What would it sound like if I were to turn this classical into jazz, for example? Okay, without needing really, creating from scratch. And last but not least, I have use case number 6, which is GALE, generative adversarial limitation learning. Okay, so it's another algorithm. This example is for autonomous vehicle training. I would say something like a Tesla. Right? It learns how to drive by itself. By the way, aren't those things something fantastic? I'm horrible at parallel parking, and when my friend said, "Okay, hop on into his Tesla," and he says, "I'm just going to push a button," and there it goes. It just like automatically did a parallel parking. It's just amazing. Right? Anyway, so Gale can be used to train vehicles by imitating expert, right, in the driving patterns, right? So certainly I don't want it to learn from me as I'm trying to do parallel parking. So anyway, so the model will observe the human driver, then it will learn to mimic that, okay, such as navigating through traffic, just reacting to certain changes that happens in the road conditions. Will help to improve its driving decision in real world scenarios, right? So there you go. So that would be the use case for Gale. But is that it though? Is this the complete? I mean, are these the only algorithms that you can use for Gen AI? And the answer is no in this case, right? So because there are a lot more things that are in the gray, it doesn't really nicely fit into these 6 type of algorithms that I just mentioned. Okay, and so I'll give you an example of that. But basically, to look and see, well, is this algorithm a Gen AI algorithm or not? Okay, what you do is you look at the behavior. That is this model capable of creating brand new content that mimics some form of the input or data? Okay. So does it produce new content? And does it look coherent? Right? Does it look natural? Right? And is it capable of creating something that did not previously exist? Because it has to be unique. Okay. And contextually aware. That is, you give certain background information, and then ask it to produce, let's say, an image. Does it understand that context and create an appropriate image for that case? Okay. So take, for example, case in point here is GPT, right? So GPT, something like ChatGPT, is generative pre-trained transformer. The GPT actually doesn't really fit nicely into one of the 6 algorithms that I've covered for you. Okay, so but GPT is considered to be generative AI, right? Just like we consider ChatGPT to be Gen AI, because what does it do? It generates text that's a new and contextually relevant. right? So you give a certain context, and then you give a command, and it'll come back with the appropriate text. Okay, and it learned from a vast amount of data without having a particular, let's say, a program that's written for it. So it's not explicitly programmed to actually come up with that particular answer. Okay, so unlike the models that generate through reconstruction of adversarial processes like the other type of algorithms, GPT uses prediction, creating sentences word by word in a way that resembles human writing, human speech. Right? So it doesn't have to be one of the defined algorithms is the point. Just look at the behavior, and you'll know that down deep you say, okay, this is Gen AI. So here's a nice table that I found in the pixelplex.io. So I have a reference underneath, but this gives you all the things that you may be able to apply Gen AI for. All in text, creating brand new text, brand new video, images, creating code, creating music, creating speech, creating 3D models. Now I've been kind of playing around with this 3D model one because I have a brand new 3D printer and I wanted to check it out. So far so okay, but I'm sure that I'll learn how to use it much better. But anyway, so I hope this gives you a wide array of opportunities in how you may want to apply Gen AI in your business. I think this probably is a good place to take a short break. I think we've been talking probably close to an hour right now. So let's go and take a 5-minute break. And after 5 minutes, we'll return and we'll get started right away. Thank you.
Sure, we are now going to take a 5-minute break, but before we do that, we are going to launch a quick poll that we want to invite you to participate in. Doing so helps us know how we can better serve you by telling us who might be interested in more information or in taking some additional training. In addition, we have a lot more informative webinars coming up, so please go to netcomlearning.com/webinars in order to register.
All right, everyone, welcome back. Okay. Moving on to section number 4, talking about evaluating risks and mitigations. So, with all these great things that Gen AI can do, and I'm sure you're seeing all the possibilities, why aren't more companies using Gen AI? Or why would some companies kind of stay away or considering, taking a long time to adopt Gen AI into their businesses? Well, there must be a good reason, right? And let's take a look and see what are some of these possible reasons for not jumping headfirst into Gen AI. So we'll be talking about the risks of Gen AI. So here I've chosen 5 items. One is brand reputation risk. Next is the regulatory and compliance risk, operational risk, intellectual property risk, and ethical risk. All right, so let's see what these risks are and hopefully, how we can mitigate them. So first one is the brand reputation risk. Okay, and I've worked for several companies where brand is so important, right? And they'll spend a lot of money and a lot of effort into protecting their brand. So anything that would actually cause a major risk to that brand image is going to be, kind of hard to adopt, right? Okay, so let's see how Gen AI is a concern. So the risk here is that you use Gen AI and it can produce content doesn't really align with your values, your messaging, and if that gets out into the public, that may very well damage the brand's reputation. Okay. So an example here, for example, right, is a Gen AI tool used for social media posts. Okay, as we earlier mentioned, that was one of the benefits, right? But it might, it may have kind of slipped into, right, generate content that is offensive or not appropriate for your customer base. And that can lead to all kinds of bad things, right? Like backlashes and you know uh, really harming your brand's image. Okay. Now, is it true? Have companies actually suffered from the brand image? And all you have to do is just search Google and say Gen AI brand damage or reputation damage. Okay, and I actually do have a site here. Let me just go here. This is CIO.com. Okay, 10 famous AI disasters. Okay, so let me turn this off here. Sorry about that. Okay, and here we go. 10 famous AI disasters. Okay, I kind of like that image. Look at that. Okay, so here it is. It says insights from data and machine learning algorithm can be invaluable, but mistakes can be irreversible. All right, so I'm not going to go through too much into these articles, but if you take a look, they will give you right, some examples of what these brand image damages were using AI and Gen AI specifically. All right, let me go back to that. Okay. All right. So, I'm sorry, I just remembered a case, and I'm not sure if it's a brand damage, but it was definitely a damage to the reputation. I'm not sure if you've heard about it. I don't think I could find it on I may be able to find it on Google, but these couple of lawyers preparing for their case, and they were heading to their destination, to court appearance. And while on the flight, they were doing some creative writing using, I'm not sure if it was ChatGPT, but probably was. So it created a document that they were going to use for that day's court appearance. And when they used it, they were referring to a case study that did not exist. Right? It's called hallucination. And the opposing lawyers and also the judge said, "Yeah, can you give me the actual reference to that case that you just mentioned?" And they could not because it was not real. And they were reprimanded for that, right? Says, "Oh, sorry, ChatGPT said, give it to me," and said, "Uh huh, right, okay." So yeah, there you go. So that's the kind of things that you may face, right? So that's a reputational risk. You have to kind of remember that Gen AI is about coming out with something creative, right? So if you're looking for something that is real, okay, not creative, but something that actually happened, like historically true, it's probably not a job for Gen AI to do that. Okay, and also remember the one where we checked for whether it was a cat or a dog, and it's the one where there was a fierce looking cat and said, "Yeah, I think this is a cat," but I believe it was they were sure they was 67% sure that it was a cat, but there was a possibility that it was a dog, right? It thought. So that means it's not coming out with 100% true answer. It's coming out with a pretty close, but pretty good, but there's still room for error. Okay. And so you have to kind of realize that's the nature of AI, at least for now. Okay. So yeah, there you go. So let's take a look and see what's the other types of risk. Okay. The second one here is the regulatory and compliance risk. Okay, and when I was actually looking at this, it reminded me of the time where working in the cloud wasn't really common. It was kind of, it's kind of way back then. But so if a company wanted to use cloud, for example, like AWS and other cloud vendors, some compliance, like an audit list, would not allow you to use the cloud. Because if they found out that you're using the cloud for systems, they will fail you in the audit, right? Those were the days. and but now, these a lot of these audit requirements have modified so that you can actually use the cloud, but it's pretty strict rules as to how you can actually use the cloud in order to pass the audit, right? So in a similar fashion, I think Gen AI is going through that. So the risk is the use of Gen AI must be in compliance with any type of regulatory requirements that you may have for your company as well as in your industry, because non-compliance could result in legal penalties, right? Failing the audit, okay, or worse. Okay. So the example here is a business using AI generated content for, let's say, financial advice must ensure that those advices are in compliance with the financial regulations, for example. Okay, because if you don't, yeah, you could very well be sued, I'm sure, if you're in the United States. So here I looked at the site McKinsey, right? So a very well-known consulting company. So let's take a look. So McKinsey here, let's see, says Gen AI advises regulators and risk functions rush to keep pace. Okay, so what they're saying here is, look, just like I mentioned about the cloud and the regulatory and audit requirements, it the regulatory requirements are falling behind, right? Because Gen AI, I'm sure, is moving much quicker, right? So eventually this may change, but right now we're kind of in the limbo state, right? Where some people have to make a decision, says this is okay to do in your industry or not okay to do in your industry, right? So things are kind of in the flux. And if you to read this article, that's basically what they are referring to. Okay, so let's take a look at the other ones here, the operational risk. Okay, so operational risk, what is it? What is operational risk? So if you rely on Gen AI a lot, okay, it could possibly lead to inefficiency if your Gen AI produces low quality or incorrect outputs, right? Making mistakes. Okay. Um, that actually in the end requires human intervention to fix. Okay, right? Might as well, it's probably faster just doing a human input and output from the beginning. It could lead that way. So, for example, if an AI system used to draft legal documents, see that the document case that I mentioned, if it's used to draft legal documents, it might produce draft that contains errors, right? Creating things that didn't exist. Okay, requiring really review by humans to make sure that it's all okay. Okay, that's going to cost a lot of time. That's going to cost, it's going to cost you money. Okay, um, so I have here and highlighted ChatGPT is making a fake Guardian articles. Okay, so it's actually called hallucinations, and it's common in Gen AI. So hallucinations are they're just making things up. Okay, and you'll notice that sometime I'm sure you've noticed it too if you use ChatGPT. You ask it to do something. So for example, I was asking for I was trying to come up with a nice quote for my book chapters when I was writing a book. And it came out with this wonderful, wonderful quote. I says, "Wow, this is great. Okay, this sounds great." So, who made this quote? Who said this? Because I was going to put that, on my cover, and ChatGPT came out and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. This person did not say that." I said, "Oh, thank you for telling me that." Um, and I was not on the website and Google searches. I was not able to, in the end, find anybody who said that great quote. And I just had to put in anonymous, or I could have just said ChatGPT said it, right? But things like that. Okay, so you do have to be careful. And for me, in order for me to avoid this, is that I'll normally use ChatGPT on things that I know I have some expertise in, so that when I see it write something, I says, this doesn't sound right. Okay, so I can spot it as I am actually creating the document. Okay. So yeah, there you go. So operationally, it may actually take a human in the end before you can publish it publicly. How about the intellectual property risk? Okay, so here the risk is Gen AI might create something that unintentionally, okay, violate the IP rights, right? Intellectual property rights of someone, and that could lead to going to court, costing a lot of time and money for legal disputes, and perhaps financial penalties, right? And the example here is, Gen AI tools making marketing material might come close to replicating design or text from copyrighted sources. Okay, and that would be, infringement on, the creator's intellectual property. And you probably heard of ChatGPT and others being sued over the content that they use, the data they use to train the ChatGPT, saying, "Look, you got this from my book, you got this from my art, and I didn't make it available to use to train the data on." Okay, and there are some hotly debated court cases, and I'm sure you'll be able to find it if you Google it. Okay, and lastly, let's take a look at the ethical risk. Ethical risk, right? So what is that, right? So the risk here is by using Gen AI, there are certain risks related to transparency, okay, and also something called bias and accountability, right? So let's take a look at that. So, and because if you fail to address these actually can lead to criticisms by the public and the loss of customer trust. Okay, so but what are we talking about exactly? So here, the example that I've chosen for you is a customer service chatbot powered by Gen AI provides biased response. Okay, and I haven't really talked about what a bias is. So bias is actually a problem in machine learning in general. So I'll give you some examples of that. Okay, or lack of transparency in the decision making process. Like, how did you come up with that answer? Right? And ChatGPT will probably say, "Oh, creatively," right? Okay, but if you cannot trace, certain decisions have to be backed by a explanation of how you actually came up with that answer. And if you're saying, well, randomly, that's probably is not a good answer, right? So you might be misusing Gen AI on areas that maybe, that requires this kind of transparency. So it could lead to, once again, customer dissatisfaction, loss of trust. Okay, so let's take a look and see the link that I've chosen for you. So here we are. So this one here, beware of Dr. Chatbot, Gen AI often gives unreliable, biased medical advice. Okay, so without going into detail here, um, so if you have the data, the training data, let's say that is based on, let's say in the United States, and the data, let's say, comes mostly from, men, let's say, right, just as an example, right? And if you use that Gen AI brain, okay, the model to give some kind of advice to women, the because the Gen AI was not trained on the data using women, the answer might be skewed towards what is appropriate for men, right? So it's not like it's something that must be handled at the time where you choose the training data. That's why training data is very, very important. If you give inaccurate set of training data, look, your Gen AI model is not going to know the difference. Is, oh, this is my world and this is all the data you give me, so I'm going to do the best I can with the data that you give me. And the bad thing about the bias is oftentimes people who trained the model didn't even realize that's what was happening. It says, oh my God, I had no idea, right? That this data was so skewed. Okay, so bias is very easily to happen within the model. It is hard sometimes for people who's actually there when they're training to realize that they've actually inserted certain type of bias by choosing the type of data that they've chosen. So given these types of risks, can we fix it? That is, how can we mitigate these risks so that we can move forward with applying Gen AI? And let's go one by one. So the first one is the brand reputation risk. Can we mitigate that? Right? Think about all the type of possible ways that your brand can be damaged by use or misuse of the Gen AI. So here we have to make sure that we check the content before we publish it to the world. Yes. So we're looking for the Gen AI output, making sure that that makes sense and that it is in alignment with your brand and brand statements, brand message. Okay. So you could possibly use AI tools for this too, which is kind of interesting. AI to kind of keep a watch on the AI, and kind of flag it and say, okay, so this one may be questionable. Let's have a human take a look at it. Okay, before publication. So make sure that there is some type of a human or personal oversight and final approval. As a minimum for accountability of publishing content from AI. All right, so that would be how you would mitigate that. So there may be other ways, but this is a very straightforward way of doing that. Let's take a look at the compliance risk. Okay, so as discussed earlier, the compliance it's fluid, right? It's changing because AI is still, well, Gen AI is still quite new, and compliance and regulatory requirements may be kind of catching up to it. Okay, so we have to keep updated, keep abreast of the AI related regs or regulations, and make sure that you are always in compliance to that, right? So that involves things like governance, so perhaps data governance policies that you have in your company, and make sure that the data meets with the privacy requirements that you may have. And just may have to talk to some legal experts to review these practices. So here I have a reference site for you. So let's take a look and see what this is all about. So here, this one is where it tracks the current regulations related to AI, not just Gen AI, but AI in general. Okay, so this is updated as of February this year. So you may want to kind of keep track of that and keep an eye on what applies to your industry. So the next one here is the operational risk. So remember, AI just giving you bad data where you have to go back and fix it anyway using human power. That's like double work, triple work, and it just slows down your operation. So what do you do, right, to mitigate this? So once again, put a human in the loop, right? Human in the loop somewhere, so that the human can actually check to make sure that the bad content does not go forward with it, right? Within the process. So validating the output from AI. Okay. So regularly retrain the model so that the model stay within your expected accuracy boundaries. Okay. So if you expect the AI to give you somewhere around 95% accuracy, and if it starts to drift into 90s and 80s, low 90s and high 80s or something, you have to say, okay, that's it. It's outside the boundary. We have to retrain this thing to make it better. Okay. So that's something you have to do constantly, and make sure that there is some type of fallback mechanism where human intervention is required for critical decision making. So, yeah, so once again, human in the loop is one of the answers on mitigating this type of risk. Next one is mitigation for intellectual property. Okay, so this one here, it's all about the data, right? The original data. Because if the original data contains intellectual property data, it's going to be very hard for the model to understand that, the difference between I can't use that data, yes, I can use that data. So it's the people who feeds the model that has to be careful that the data that they use is not already violating the intellectual property. Okay, so to avoid this kind of IP infringement, make sure you do regular audits for the content, as well as for the source data that you're using to train the model. And last one here is a ethical risk. If you remember, we talked about bias. So you have to develop and stick by ethical AI guidelines, right? That is looking for transparency. If you need to provide, how did you get this, how did you get this answer, how did you get this image, etc., right, that you will be able to give some traces as to the process that you use for the GenAI model to come up with that particular output. Okay. So train AI on diverse data set to minimize biases, right? Okay. So if the data is biased, the GenAI model will also be biased. Okay. So also implement fairness audits and bias detection tools. Yeah, right. So there are tools because the bias problem is pretty common. Okay, so there are solutions to that. So keep an eye on the AI output, okay, as well. So let's see here. Negative Gen AI's ethical risk to score competitive values, right? So let's take a look at this one here. I have the IMD. So this one says here, hang on here just a moment. Let me get rid of that. So it says, as new technology continue to emerge, organization must determine what technology is potentially disruptive and what is merely a shiny object. Okay, so Gen AI is a case in point, and you may want to take a look at this as well. Okay, and make sure that Gen AI is the proper tool for the problem that you're trying to solve. Because first of all, machine learning isn't an answer to every problem that you have, right? So machine learning is an answer to some of the problems that you have. That means Gen AI also is not going to be an answer to every problem that you have, every business problem. So you have to make sure that you apply Gen AI in a proper problem and not for others. Alrighty. So I think that should give you some good information. So and governance is a term that we normally use, right? So in general, governance means that is the company doing what it says it's going to do, right? And you have a transparency in a lot of aspects of the business, right? So AI governance is the same. So it allows you to align the use of AI in alignment with your organizational goals. Okay, so it's about meeting business goals and doing it using in the ethical manner, as well as you manage the technology in a very efficient manner. So AI governance is pretty important. And here I have an article from AWS, right? So governance perspective, managing AI-driven organization. So if you want to know how you would incorporate in the AI governance into your current governance framework or policies that you have, take a look at resources like this, right? And there, it's not just AWS. There are other organizations that will provide you with some ideas as to how you would incorporate governance of AI. Okay, getting back. All right, so now let's go into a case study. So this case study is for you to consider whether you would think about incorporating GenAI into your business. And because of the type of training that I do have an opportunity to talk to customers. Some companies are actively, aggressively moving towards using GenAI. And some companies are kind of standing back and saying, let me think about it. Okay, so that's the thing that I would like for you to consider using this case study and think about how you would react to this. Okay, so I'm going to use an example of something called the AI coding companion. Okay, and it goes by different names. Most of the cloud vendors that I know have something like this. And I'm sure other companies also provide something like this as well. Okay, it was really inevitable that we will actually get to this stage where AI and Gen AI is writing code, that is programs. Okay, so here we go. So coding companion. The sample that I'm going to give you, or the example that I'm going to give you, is a service in AWS, Amazon Web Services, called Amazon Q Developer. Okay, so Amazon Q Developer, as I used to know it, is called Code Whisperer. And they changed the name recently and included into this thing called Amazon Q Developer. And Amazon Q is an existing service. It's a machine learning service that actually makes it very easy and conversational to use Gen AI on AWS platform. So they've added this assistant type of service for programmers and code developers, right? So I've actually kind of grabbed some of the terms and phrases from the website here on the Amazon Q Developer, and it says, well, what is it? Well, it generates real-time code suggestions ranging from snippets. Snippet means just a small piece of code, to full functions. That is like the complete program, based on your comments and existing code. Okay, so if you look at the site, so let's see, let's take a look at the site. Okay, and let me kind of highlight this one right here. Okay, so let's see what's happening here. So the gray part is the human, the blue part is the AI. So the human says, help me write a function to get a wallet repository from DynamoDB. For your information, DynamoDB is a database, okay, on AWS. And the AI comes back and says, sure, here's how I'd handle that if it were me. Okay, number one, do this. Number two, do that. Number three, do that. How does it sound? And the person said, yeah, hey, go ahead with that. That is, says, yeah, please write a code doing that. Okay. Is that what you imagine what a programmer is doing these days? But that's the world that we live in. And so there you go. So you're asking for advice. And then if the advice looks good, you say, oh yeah, please produce a programming code that would do that. Okay. Okay. And the second one is write unit tests, optimize code, scan for vulnerabilities. So the unit test is basically when a programmer writes a small piece of independent code that you test to make sure that everything is working correctly, right? So it's very important that you test, and that's usually called the unit testing. And optimize code. So optimize code means, programmers are very creative. So if you ask 10 people to write a code, they'll all come up with, to solve a problem, they'll all probably come up with something different. So some people may write a very efficient code, some people may write a very verbose code, right? It just depends. So optimizing code. So the Q developer will fix the code to make it so that it's optimized for speed and other metrics. And so this is the field that I'm in, scan for vulnerabilities. Now, vulnerabilities are possible errors or the way one writes the code that opens the program up for hackers to attack into. And this happens all the time. That's why you have a lot of hacking going on some of these codes, because the codes themselves are very, very weak and not secure, not written in a way that that closes all these weaknesses, which are vulnerabilities. So before you publish them to the world, the the AI is going to look through your code and point out all the possible vulnerabilities. And then if you say, oh yeah, hey, that looks good, can you fix it? I'm sure they'll fix it for you. Okay. And the last one is suggest remediation that help fix your code instantaneously. Okay, so you write the code, you ask the AI companion, hey, is there something wrong with this? Can you find something wrong with it? It says, yeah, found it. Here, 10 things that are wrong with it. Can you fix it? Sure, let me fix it for you. I don't think it takes much of a stretch of imagination to say, can you write the code from the first place? I mean, if you're going to look at my code and fix my code, you must be able to write the code, right? From scratch. And I'm sure they'll say, yep, I can. If you want me to, do you want me to? Anyway, so I'm not sure when these AIs will start becoming a companion. You see what I mean? So, but these, so AWS has a code whisperer, right? Amazon Q developer, and Microsoft has Copilot, and others have, they go by different names, but it's out there already. Okay, so the benefit of this, and I'm sure, if you're thinking about this, and if you do have some programming that you have to do in your business, you're saying, wow, okay, that sounds pretty nice. And so what would be the benefit of this? Okay. Oh, by the way, before we actually move off from this slide, remember the non-metric to metric conversion application? The one where I converted from a miles to kilometers, very at the very beginning of the webinar. Yeah. So that was a code written in JavaScript that I asked ChatGPT to create for me. So I wrote none of that code. ChatGPT I said, hey, can you give me a simple JavaScript that would do this? And said, yeah, no problem. Here it is. Boom. And it worked the first time. It wasn't pretty, but that's okay. It was just a mere 5 minutes of work, right? To come up with that sample. Anyway, so moving away from that, so what would be the benefit? Oh my gosh. Just like when I said that code, I just wrote it, or I had ChatGPT write it, and then I made sure that it worked. Increases my productivity for sure. Okay, and the improved code quality. Remember how it can find a broken program, it can optimize code, it can fix security issues. So improves code quality, right? Okay, and learning and skill development. So I put a little star on there because that's questionable for me. So if I keep on using these types of code companion, I'm not sure if that's going to make me a better programmer in the end. I think it'll make me a better companion in the end, right? The code companion in the end. So I'll know how to guide AI, but I'm not sure if it's going to help me learn JavaScript, Python, Java, you name it. It's questionable, at least in my experience, okay? Because I'll probably become more dependent upon the tool and not write the code myself. Anyway, so that's here nor there, okay? And next one here is enhanced collaboration. So the enhanced collaboration refers to, because we have a consistent code generation, is going to help with uniformity. And so why is that important? Uniformity in code is because a lot of times when you're working in a company, the code that you write could be improved upon by some other developer or fixed by another developer. So people have to be able to look at your code and understand what it's doing or what it's not doing quickly. Well, it's not as easy as it sounds, right? So looking at somebody else's code could be pretty difficult. But if there is a standard style and more uniform it is in its presentation, it's easier for other people to pick up your code and move on from there. So this way, it's very, very helpful for collaborating with other developers, right? Now, for the businesses, what would be their benefit? Okay, faster time to market. Why? Because the code can be written and created in a speed, right? So record speed, very, very fast. Okay, so rather than taking a whole day, it only takes you 5 minutes. Okay, for example, um, cost efficiency. Why? Because a lot of the work that you may have to hire people into to do, now you can replace some of that with Gen AI, right? Just like we talked about earlier as to the benefit of using Gen AI, right? Was to reduce human labor for these types of tasks. Okay. Next one is improved product quality. Yes, once again, because Gen AI will most likely produce code that is um, better structured, less security issues, okay, and highly readable, highly maintainable, right? So all that good stuff. So product quality should be good. Resource optimization. So the resource optimization talks about developers can spend more time on something that is not just writing code, but more high value tasks such as architecture and design and problem solving, right? So working at the level right before it turns into actual code. Right? So one can spend more time on that. Then you can just go ahead and pass that along to Gen AI, who can actually create the code themselves. Okay. So, and then lastly, innovation and competitiveness. So we've always talked about the one of the benefit of Gen AI, of course, is its creativeness, right? So with a routine coding task automated, development team can dedicate more time to innovative projects. Okay, that can actually make the difference, right? Competitive difference in business in the marketplace. Okay. So this is actually creativeness really applying to the humans, not actually to the Gen AI itself, right? And competitiveness, once again, if you can do faster development, faster time to market, you're going to be more competitive than not. All right. So then, what is the flip side? Right? What is the flip side? Okay. So what are the concerns? Because not everyone is signing up to this, right? I know some companies that I get to talk to, they're saying no to code companions, no to AI in general in a lot of places. So what are the concerns? Specifically, let's say for this particular implementation of, let's say, Q, right? Q developer, or something like Copilot and other AI tools that will assist the developer. Okay. So to the developers. So this is what I was mentioning about me anyway, is over reliance. Right? So more and more, I will lose my capacity to write code. Not to say that I could write code right now anyway, that great, but I'm going to be even worse, right? Because rather than spending time coding, I'm going to tell these AI systems to write code for me. Okay. Then the quality of suggestions, once again, right? Remember, not every code that is suggested is something that actually works. No, because there is a little bit of hallucination, involved. There is a creativeness, and it just could be flat wrong about certain types of suggestions. So once again, remember the operational risk. That is, they'll give you code that doesn't work. Then you have to go back, right? Go back and back and back, and how long is that going to take to fix a code that you didn't create in the first place? Okay. And the security risk. So even though the Gen AI, especially Q, has the capability to find vulnerabilities, right? That doesn't mean that it is perfect when it comes to security. So the code that it writes may contain vulnerabilities, right? You just never know. Okay? So maybe it's a different types of vulnerability. Maybe it's more difficult ones to find. Maybe it's more novel. But as more people use Gen AI to produce these types of code, these different types of vulnerabilities may start to sneak into the marketplace. Okay, so there are certain security risks. So you just can't, offhandedly say, oh, my code is perfect when it comes to vulnerabilities because Gen AI found every vulnerabilities that I may have. No, that's not guaranteed. Now, for the businesses, it's a very similar type of an issue, right? That is, your organization is going to become more dependent on tools. Okay, Well, but I think companies are dependent on tools anyway these days due to automations and such. But now it's going to move into the area of program development or project development. Okay. The quality control is another, issue, right? So the quality control is, once again, remember about transparency, and sometimes it's difficult to find out, well, why did you come up with this way to do something? So, you may not be able to track how Gen AI made those decisions, okay? Because at times there are certain randomness into it. Okay? So the quality control may be more difficult to do. The innovation stifling. Okay, so the innovation stifling is where you have, when you over rely upon automated code generation, that may actually work the opposite direction, where you may reduce the creativity um, of the human nature, right? So humans, I think, are very, very creative, and the creativeness, I think, in Gen AI may be, who knows, it's just my opinion, may be limited, right? Depending upon the type of data that it has and type of algorithm that it's using. And I think the creativity in humans is something that we ourselves, we don't understand quite fully, right? So anyway, so we'll probably see a less of human creativity, and we see more of AI creativity, which may be a bit stifling. Okay. And compliance concerns, right? So that's going to move forward right from the concerns that we had about compliance and regulatory requirements, right? Because certain industries may give you a caution in using Gen AI in certain industries. Okay, so now there you go, something that is a wonderful tool, I think, but there are benefits as well as concerns. Okay, and the question is, will you be using co-companions in your company? Okay. And I don't think there's a straightforward answer. I think it's a case by case. You have to weigh the risk with benefits. Okay. But there you go. So that's where I'll leave you in this module. And now we're ready to move into our last module. By now, I'm hoping that you're getting a better understanding of what Gen AI is and how you can leverage that in your business. And of course, things to keep an eye on, the risks that are associated with it. So I want to leave you with this last section, that is, if you are going to incorporate Gen AI or increase the usage of Gen AI, how can you prep your organization for moving forward with your Gen AI initiatives? So how do you prep for Gen AI? Now, prepping for Gen AI, I've chosen these 7 topics. So here, first, develop a clear vision or strategy. 2, build a skilled team. 3, establish robust data infrastructure. 4, foster a culture of innovation. 5, implement ethical guidelines. 6, pilot projects and scale. And last, 7, monitor and evaluate. All right, so let's go ahead and see one by one what that involves. So this is a little sidebar, right? In coming up with how do you prep, there are plenty of checklists out there, plenty of frameworks that you can utilize. So I'm going to be using a framework that is available on AWS. So AWS, what's called the CAF. So this is a way for you to adopt a new technology that is, this CAF stands for Cloud Adoption Framework, but AWS came up with the expanded version for Cloud Adoption Framework for AI. Okay, and it has several aspects. So it has the business aspect, the people aspect, as you see, governance, platform, security, operations. So I'll loosely follow this design going forward. So I do have a reference link for you, so you could go in there and see more into detail what the prepping steps that are suggested by AWS. So first, developing a clear vision and strategy. That's always important, right? Because for business, we're not chasing the shiny thing, but something that is going to help us in competitiveness, into achieving our business goals, right, and strategies. So here, define the objective. Right? Remember, I told you that the Gen AI and machine learning in general is not the answer to every problem that you have. Right? So that means you have to have a clear goal and expected outcome for Gen AI, for your business. Okay, understand how it will align with your business. So remember, in compliance, you have to look for alignment of your tools that you use with your business. Same with the brand, right, image, right? So you have to align Gen AI with your brand image and your brand message. And strategic planning, create a roadmap just like any other technology, right? If you're going to incorporate that, create a roadmap and outline the steps, right? Resources and anything else that you may need. So here I have a reference to the framework from AWS that talks to that topic. So let's go ahead and take a look and see in general what do they look like. So there it is, business perspective, the AI strategy in the age of AI. So I'm not going to read this. I just want to show you that there are these types of documents available that you can go ahead and leverage in your decision making. All right. So the next step is build a skill team. Yes, right. So hire experts if that's what you need. So bring people who know the topic, right? The AI specialists. Data scientists is also important because data scientists will assist you in the collection of the training data as well as vetting the data, cleansing the data. There's a lot of preparation that you need for the data before you give it to the model, right? Remember, we talked about how biases can sneak right in depending upon the type of data that you have. So it's just one aspect of what you need to do with the data. And data engineers with experience in Gen AI as well. Okay, not just in machine learning, but Gen AI it will be very helpful. And then train and develop these people as well. So invest in training programs. And the time that you're taking right now to taking like a webinar like this is your investment, right? In the road to that. So consider partnership with academic institution, perhaps continuous learning, right? So there are many ways that you can make people smart about Gen AI. Next one. Establish a robust data infrastructure. Okay, so machine learning in general takes lots and lots of data. And so where do you put the data? Somewhere in your infrastructure, right? Okay, so implement a strong data governance practice. What type of data is accessible for, let's say, training the machine learning models? Remember, it has consequences when it comes to intellectual property, as well as the privacy issues, right? So if you have the data that is should not be in there, your AI model may very well utilize those data that they should not have had access to. Okay, so make sure that you have the enough computational resources. Remember, we talked about how it scales. Well, it's not going to scale if you don't allow it to scale, right? So your infrastructure has to be built so that it can scale depending upon the volume of requests that it gets. Well, or else if you don't, if there's an overwhelming request, your AI model may become very overwhelmed, and the end users may feel delays in their answers, and it becomes less useful for them. Okay. So yes, right, traditional designing of systems, the know-how to make sure it's scalable, also available so it doesn't go down, even though there are some glitches in the infrastructure, that your system will keep on humming is how you want to design it. Okay, just like any other system that you may have for your company. Next one, foster a culture of innovation. Okay, so here you want to have a culture, corporate culture, where it allows you to experiment, right? To learn new things, especially if Gen AI is something brand new to you. Yeah, right. So how do you going to know unless you get to make mistakes? Okay, and you get the mistakes by doing a lot of experiments. Okay, and if you're going to deploy this, let's say implement this using cloud infrastructure, you're in luck because cloud is very conducive to experimentation. And the reason why is because these technologies are already available and you don't have to spend a lot of capital expenditure just to, to take the first step into using the systems. You could start using the systems now. You could start creating these Gen AI experiments now in a very small scale without costing you arm and a leg. Right? And once you know that that's exactly what you want, then yes, you could start to build on it and make it more available, more scalable, etc. Okay, but allow for experimentation to happen in order for you to gain experience and to train, in-house personnel. Okay, and use a collaborative approach, cross-functional collaboration, right, to incorporate Gen AI into all different parts of the business. So there was an article by AWS that actually talked on that. It's called Democratizing Gen AI to Inspire Diverse Innovation. So take a look at that if you are interested in that topic. And let's take a look at the next one. Implementing ethical guidelines. So we did talk about the ethical concerns in the risk and mitigation section. So develop an AI ethics policy, right? Okay, that aligns with your corporate policy as well. So have a clear policy on when you could use Gen AI and when you cannot, and when you are using it, how you can incorporate Gen AI. It has to be clear, right? For focusing on transparency, fairness, and accountability. Remember, we incorporated in mitigation a lot of human in the loop. Okay, so those are the kind of policies that you want to create, and have audits, right, in your Gen AI system. So conduct regular audits to make sure that you are still in compliance. And remember, compliance is changing; it's very fluid, it seems. Okay, at least for now, so that the auditors must also be, aware of Gen AI and their changing regulatory requirements. The next one is pilot projects and then scale. So this is pretty similar to or downstream of, allow for innovation and experimentation. So this goes true for any kind of migration work or trying something brand new, is that start small. Start small. Don't go for a big bang, right? And say, oh, we're going to incorporate this whole thing like right now. No, try small scale. Begin with a pilot project, right? To make sure that you're convinced that this is the right answer for you, to demonstrate the value of Gen AI, and then to, at the same time, identifying certain hiccups and certain roadblocks, right? Remember, we do have some concerns, so make sure that you kind of keep a keen eye on those things as you are acquiring and practicing and deploying more pilots, right? Then, once you feel comfortable that yes, it does have value, yes, it is in alignment with our policy, then you can start to scale those things up, right? So scaling up usually means to make it bigger. Okay? So use all the knowledge that you gain, experience that you gain from the pilot project, and then scale your initiative and make it bigger, and perhaps to production level. Okay. And the last part that I want to kind of show you here is monitor and evaluate, because models are normally, right. So it's a brain that was trained on certain data sets. Okay. And as the time goes along, models becomes a little bit more inaccurate, a little inefficient, and there could be all kinds of things that will go wrong with the model where it's not the model that you had, like let's say 6 months ago. Okay. Mainly because it's not the model that's changing, it's the world around it that's changing, right? So there are new additional data that's coming in that sometimes you need to retrain. But when do you retrain? Because retraining will take time, cost, effort, right? It'll take all those things. So it's an investment. So when do you decide to trigger that? Well, it depends, right? It depends. Is your model still giving you the output that you expect? Or is it drifting? That is, it's slowly but surely degrading, right? So you do have to have a plan and metrics that you're going to monitor and say, okay, when the accuracy of the answer or the output goes below, let's say 90%, that's the time. It could be anything, right? Okay, so make sure you do implement metrics to monitor your model's performance. Okay, and use feedback, right, to create a continuous loop of improvements. Okay, and manage risk. That is, you have to assess risk associated with Gen AI and update the risk mitigation strategies, because once again, if not for anything else, your compliance may be changing too, right? And your regulations may be changing too. So you have to kind of keep an eye on it. Okay, so that's all the content that I have for you, and I hope this was a informative, and I hope it helps you in your road to incorporating Gen AI, and also to look at Gen AI these days with a new perspective. Okay, so I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Terumi. That was very informative. I know everyone is looking forward to the Q&A session, so go ahead and start putting your questions into the questions panel. And now I'd like to give the presentation rights over to Remy, our vendor manager, to introduce our promotions and webinar-related courses.
Thank you, Tracy. And I believe everyone must have learned something new today or would have been able to brush up their skills around the fundamentals of AWS Cloud. I would quickly like to take you through some of our handpicked resources, which we think will immensely help in accelerating your AWS Cloud scaling journey. Well, this document here of sharing on my screen, this has been shared with you all in the handout section of GoToWebinar panel. You can download this document and access all the resources and browse all the offerings we have curated for you. So first up here is the list of our recommended courses, which we feel will best suit your learning journey after attending our masterclass. All these courses are hyperlinked. Feel free to go through them post-event and check out the course descriptions, prerequisites, and the value it can add to you and your team's skill sets. Additionally, we have curated a blend of resources, including our upcoming and on-demand events, as well as informative and educational blogs. You can make the most of these resources to gain extensive knowledge on the AWS topics they cover. Next up, I am thrilled to introduce the AWS Skill Builder, a dynamic learning center featuring over 600 digital courses crafted by AWS experts. I'm sure most of you must be aware of AWS Skill Builder. What is unique about this platform are the engaging game-based learning experiences. So through AWS Cloud Quest and team-based competitions on AWS Jam events. If you're hearing these terms, Cloud Quest and Jam events for the first time, I would highly recommend you click on this button and you go to our AWS Skill Builder page. I'm sure you will be amazed to see what all the Skill Builder has to offer. They have set of these gaming experiences in practical real world scenarios, which makes it so easy to understand concepts, technology, and processes. And it makes it so interesting for the learner. And for organizations, it saves a lot of time on employee skilling and ultimately enhancing the efficiency and productivity. As someone at Netcom who values continuous learning, I'm confident that AWS Skill Builder will be a game changer for any organization looking to upskill their workforce on AWS technologies. I encourage you to explore the diverse range of digital courses and experiences it offers. You can simply, as I said, click on this button right here, learn more, and you can explore more about the Skill Builder and the pricing aspect of this. Moving on to the next offering. Our free AWS e-learning courses follow a self-paced training model wherein you get the liberty of accessing extensive course-related videos that are delivered by the AWS subject matter experts on the go. So these videos cover the availability on the device of your choice, so you can access them from your laptop, your tablet, or from your phone as well. There are more than 280 videos covering various AWS topics explained in a very easy to comprehend language. You can simply sign up for free, watch these videos, and make the most out of them. Also, here I would like to inform you that this session is being recorded. So, in case you want to refer back to any of the topics that the trainer might have covered in today's session, we will be sharing the recording link with you through emails, and also you can access it here by clicking on this button. So you have to download this handout for that. And then if you want to revisit any topic, you can just simply click on the access recording and you can revisit the session and learn at your own pace. Now, apart from our virtual sessions, you can also catch the relevant updates related to IT and business trainings on our social media handles. So please feel free to follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for all the latest updates. Our official pages and channels are linked here on the icons. Finally, if you have any suggestions regarding the topics you would like us to cover in our upcoming webinars and masterclasses, please don't hesitate to send us a direct message, or you can leave a comment on our social media posts, or you can just simply email us at info@netcomlearning.com. We would definitely try to come up with the sessions on your suggested topics. Thank you once again for joining us today. Over to you, Tracy.
Thanks so much for guiding us through that information, Remy. And now we're going to go ahead and jump right into our question and answer session. The first question we have today is, what skills and expertise are required within our team to successfully implement generative AI projects?
Okay, so this is reference to, we did cover this just a little bit in how do you prep, right, for your Gen AI initiatives. So the answer would be, for you to successfully implement Gen AI, you need people from several areas of expertise, right? So you'll need data scientists, okay? And those are people who understand how to build and train AI models, right? So that's pretty critical, right? You also need software engineers because these models have to be integrated with your remaining systems, right? And also, the third piece of the puzzle is what we call the business domain experts. So these are the people who know your business and guide the AI on what it should be doing, right? So this is where you decide whether the business problem can be solved by AI, specifically Gen AI, right? So it's also, of course, helpful to have a project manager because these types of project could have requirement for a lot of coordination and making sure that everything kind of stays on track and moving towards the same goal. Because as you can see, there are a lot of different people that are involved in the project. I hope that's helpful.
Let's take another question. How do we measure the return on investment for generative AI projects?
Okay, good question. Thank you. So to measure the ROI for, let's say, Gen AI project, you have to kind of look at, well, what benefits are you getting versus the costs that you are expending, right? So on the benefit side, you could track stuff like, if can you track increase in efficiency? I hope you can, right? How about cost savings? Okay, higher revenue. How about improved customer satisfaction? Now, some of these things will require creatively to come up with the metrics so that the more quantitative or qualitative you are, it's kind of soft. So it's better to have quantitative type of metric. So yeah, so that's how you measure the benefits. On the cost side, you have to include the expenses for actually developing the model and also the integration for the system, perhaps the training and also deployment and ongoing maintenance of that system, right? So if you compare these to see the gains outweigh the investment, great, right? So you have to kind of keep an eye on these metrics for your project goals, like reduce time for tasks or better quality of outputs and such. And that's how you would balance out and calculate the ROI.
Last question for today is, can you share some insights on how leading companies are using generative AI to drive business transformation?
Okay, so I'll be happy to do that. In fact, I found a pretty good site for you. So let me switch the screen. Hang on just a moment. Let's see if that, okay. So I'm hoping that you're seeing now, this is an AWS site, and you'll be able to find it for other cloud vendors as well, is these customer stories. and custom success stories using GenAI, right? So there it is. So all you need to do is, Google it and you'll find it. And let me see here if I can go ahead and scroll. Okay. So if I were to go into that site, let me go down to where there are some innovative companies. I mean, there are a lot of information here, but okay, so this is where we're talking about certain companies, right? So DoorDash, okay. Smartsheets. I'm not sure if you know Smartsheet is almost like a online Excel sheet. Um, let's see. I have to find the ones that I know. All right, Merrick. There it is, and others. So let's see if we can go to the next site. No, we saw that. Let's see. Airtable, BMW. So there's plenty of examples of how Gen AI is assisting these organizations. So there are a lot of companies that are actually going really fast into Gen AI and assisting their businesses. So there you go. So go ahead and go for it and check it out. And I believe that's all the questions. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending today's webinar. And it was my pleasure, spending this time with you. And I hope this actually assists in your journey into Gen AI and AI in general with the cautious eye. Okay, maintaining your brand image at the same time, creating very competitive, innovative products for your customers. Thank you so much, and hope to see you in another webinar. Bye.
Once again, I want to remind you that as you leave this session today, you will be presented with a short survey. We would like to request for you to help us by taking a quick moment to participate in that survey. Your feedback really helps us understand your learning experience as we are constantly looking at how we can improve our future sessions. The survey answers are measured on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 representing outstanding and 1 representing poor. We want to thank all of you for joining us today, and if you do come up with any additional questions, feel free to send them to webinar@netcomlearning.com at any time. We hope that you found today's webinar informative, and we look forward to seeing you back here with us soon. Feel free to tell your friends and colleagues about our webinars and other courses. Have a great day, everyone.